Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be responding to CinemaSin's Everything Wrong with Alien 3, and for the duration of me speaking I shall utilize some clips from Team Fortress 2 just so there's something interesting to watch. So let's begin.
Exciting, right? Alien and Aliens were awesome. We're seeing dark, scary space, and the title is a thing of beauty. Pop the up! I'm sure it only gets better from here.
Now this may be more of a personal nitpick, but we all know that he's already seen Alien 3 and thus knows what quality it is, or at least has his opinion on it formed and it is not favorable, so I don't see why he has to do these theatrics in favor of adding another sin to the movie. And I know a lot of people would argue, well, it's all a joke, but I will get into that later.
Emergency escape.
Why so calm about this, announcer lady? Isn't this the time to get a little animated and let Ripley know some shit's going down?
Typically during emergency broadcasts, they try to present it in as calm of a tone as possible, because the last thing they want is for people to be utterly panicked and make mistakes and get themselves or others injured in their attempts at getting out. What would more likely cause a panic? Everybody please make your way to the emergency exit, or the entire place is on fire! Run! Run! Run!
Yeah, but it's not that David Fincher. Obviously the guy who directed Fight Club, The Social Network, Zodiac, and Seven wouldn't be responsible for this heap of trash. Probably like a Paul Thomas Anderson versus a Paul W.S. Anderson situation.
Everything Wrong with Alien 3. It was directed by David Fincher. Is it really so hard to imagine that David Fincher would make a bad movie considering the absolute clusterfuck that was the production of the film? What with its rampant script rewrites, executive meddling, and rushed nature? Alien 3 did not have the luxury of being more of a almost indie art project than anything under Ridley Scott, or have the backing of James Cameron and his perfectionism and unwillingness to put up with studio bullshit. David Fincher was dealt a bad set of cards and he tried to make the best of what he had available to him.
Sigourney Weaver is stripped down to her bare necessities in an Alien movie cliché.
There's been literally 2 movies where that happened in the Alien franchise, and I don't know how common that is outside of Alien. But within the context of Alien, how is that a cliché? It's something that happened maybe twice between both movies, and considering that sex and reproduction is a major theme in the Alien franchise, it makes sense there might be some promiscuous imagery with the leading actress.
A 337 model EEV crash landed here at 0600.
How is this dude taken seriously as a leader with that voice? He sounds like a combination of Brother Maynard's assistant from Holy Grail and the marriage priest from The Princess Bride.
It is entirely possible that this guy has qualities that make him formidable and respectable outside of the timbre of his voice. In fact, there's quite a few instances in history alone where somebody who's considered an absolute badass does not quite have the voice one would expect to go with it.
The great fundamental issue now before our people can be stated briefly. It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not.
I mean, that guy can kick any president's ass, and he sounds like the warden from Cool Hand Luke.
Using this much alcohol before administering a simple injection.
Any medical professional would be able to vouch for the idea that it is better to over-prepare than under-prepare.
I'm the chief medical officer here.
Here.
Fury 161. It's one of Weyland Yutane's backwater work prisons.
Does Wayland Yutani own every f***ing piece of space? I guess monopoly laws are a lot lighter in 2179.
The Alien franchise has always taken place in a shitty, late-stage capitalist, corporate shithole of a universe, where a single company has unimaginable power over just about every facet of human life. This is something that was evident even in the first movie, which, oddly enough, despite sharing so many qualities with Cyberpunk, came out before Neuromancer, which was published in 1984. So I guess the question is Scorn technically cassette futurism?
This used to be a 5,000 convict facility.
Long before he worked with Aaron Sorkin, David Fincher was already working on his walk and exposit game.
Though movies are primarily a visual medium, every so often the necessary evil of having to tell rather than simply show needs to be done in order for things to progress. Having these walking and talking sections tends to add a little bit of interest since you're still seeing more of the environment and there's actual movement on the screen. Not every director is Quentin Tarantino, who can make two characters sitting down over a glass of milk the most riveting thing in cinema.
Possible contagion.
What kind, exactly?
Cholera.
Cholera?
Ripley now suspects this might be the result of an alien on board after seeing the goo on Newt's cryo-tube. So why wouldn't she go ahead and make Clemens aware of this possibility? Even if she doesn't think he'll believe in the alien theory, she could say it's a parasite or something along those lines. Hiding info at this point makes zero sense.
I actually agree with this, and it seems to be a fairly common thing in horror movies where a character would be trying to escape some fantastic creature, a monster, a serial killer from hell, an alien, and when they call the police, they say exactly what's attacking them and isn't being taken seriously. Like in that film, Eight-Legged Freaks, where he calls the police about the spiders. Why not just say the mall is being attacked by terrorists or some armed insurgents? They'll send over the SWAT team and then they'll be able to radio in, "Oh, it's actually giant spiders." If I were the Birdman, who is much better at responding to cinema sins, and actually keeps a tally on what sins Cinema Sins commits, I would take one off for this.
They're gonna f*** with the dog, aren't they? F*** you, movie. You never f*** with the dog. Has Old Yeller taught you nothing? And I blame you for I Am Legend.
Both Old Yeller and, to a lesser extent, I Am Legend are remembered specifically because they killed the dog. But fun fact, it was originally going to be an ox. They just had trouble handling an ox on set. Turns out they're not as obedient as dogs.
Andrews clearly didn't want Ripley walking around the facility any longer because the inmates might get terrible ideas. But it's perfectly fine for her to stand next to all of them at a funeral for people that none of them except Ripley even knew.
Andrews is right there reading the eulogy, and despite his voice, they very well take him seriously as their leader and are less likely to try something with him nearby.
There's always a new life, a new beginning.
Literalism.
One thing I've noticed is that CinemaSins seems to dislike it when movies utilize common artistic practices, such as having a character speak about something unaware of a different event happening at the same time that, while not literally what he's talking about, is thematically related. It's something that happens in movies all the time. In fact, you can even almost call it a cliché.
I guess just like human babies, the aliens will all differ in size when they're born, but holy that is a huge alien. There's no way a dog that size was harboring that monstrosity for any amount of time, and when we see the dog's body, it emerged from a single hole.
This is another valid criticism of the movie and the result of the aforementioned change from bovine to canine in the script.
I tell you, it's weird. The only one to survive that crash was a woman.
Why is that weird? It's a crash. Surviving depends on position in the craft and other things that have zero to do with gender.
If you consider the fact that biologically men are stronger and more durable than women, there could actually be an influence of gender as to who does or does not survive a crash. But the funny thing is, CinemaSins actually shows exactly the reason why these people find it so astonishing that it's a woman who survived.
You see, we've got a good place to wait here. And until now, no temptation.
So before now, there's been no temptation? Because there are also thieves and murderers to go along with the rapists. And no one has been tempted to murder anyone or steal anything? No one?
So the prisoners have taken a vow of celibacy as part of their quasi-religious nature, similar to monks or priests in real life. And it just so happens that out of the sky, the one survivor of some crash was a woman. It wasn't Bishop, who's an android and modeled after a man. It wasn't Newt, who was a prepubescent little girl, and we have no reason to assume any of these people are pedophiles. It's a grown woman. Something that might cause a bit of problems and conflict with their whole vow of celibacy thing. It's pretty easy to take that vow when you're surrounded by dudes and aren't interested in them. It's a bit harder when there's one woman there and you're getting biological urges. Given their religious nature, they assume that Ripley was likely sent by some sort of deity to test them, since random women just don't fall out of the sky in some backwater prison planet.
Death was instantaneous.
No I take it he was pulled into the fan.
You think? But seriously, how has this not happened before, given how close you have to be to the fan to do this job?
It may be difficult for someone who likes to feign ignorance and outright misrepresent a movie to understand, but some people are actually good at their jobs.
You know, wandering around without an escort is really going to piss Superintendent Andrews off.
Maybe Clemens should have spoken up about that when she had to go fend for herself in the cafeteria.
Or maybe it's best not to draw any more attention to her than she already had in a cafeteria full of dudes who are struggling to uphold their vow of celibacy. It seems much better to relay that to her in private, where you're certain that you're able to keep your cool and she'll be in no danger around you.
Oh goody, 40 minutes in and we haven't had a single decent alien sequence, but we're getting an attempted rape scene. This movie is fun.
Except we did. In fact, you even sinned that scene.
Spike, are you down there?
I know the lighting isn't the best. Hell, I'd say that about this entire movie, but come on, man. How would Thomas possibly mistake this big-ass xenomorph for his f***ing dog?
But really, dude, you're upset about rape in an alien movie? A fucking franchise where the titular creature literally rapes people as part of its life cycle? Are you really being that obtuse?
What the is doing that?
Have you seen how many candles there are in this compartment? 2 of them go out, and it gets your spidey sense all aroused? What the is doing that? I don't know, the air in the compartment? Also, is this saying the xenomorph is blowing these things out like a birthday cake? I guess he was born today, but that's some incredible lung capacity for an infant.
Except you clearly show in that scene that there are dozens of other candles that are able to be lit and not extinguished by the air in the room, which means that some additional factor has to be present to extinguish those 2 candles specifically. And considering they're starting to become aware that there's something in there with them that they'd rather not be there with them, that can be kind of worrying. I mean, seriously, Jeremy, if you were walking along in the woods and there's a bunch of bushes around you, and then one of them starts to rustle a bit, would you seriously think nothing of it, or would you wonder why there's that one discrepancy? Because it could actually be a life or death situation. In fact, we even evolved to treat it as a life and death situation. And yes, Jeremy, it probably does have better lungs than a human infant, being an alien and all.
This works.
Why are you feigning ignorance? We've seen in the first movie it's possible to bring an android back to quote-unquote life after it's been severely damaged.
Man, this xenomorph is sneaky as balls. What was it doing? Hiding in a ninja stance on the ceiling pipes, ready to pounce after these buttholes were good and scared? Aren't these things fast and strong? Do they need to employ stealth tactics?
You've seen the first movie. You know that xenomorphs employ stealth tactics. When there's a single xenomorph in a location, it will try to hide and wait for prey to come to it, rather than rushing out and trying to attack prey. This isn't Aliens Colonial Marines. The xenomorphs are actually pretty smart in it.
Is it on the Sulaco, or did it come with us in the EV?
It was with us all the way.
If he can detect that now, why couldn't they detect that then? Seems like that would have been a super important thing to check for before departing the place where you were attacked by a swarm of aliens.
Listen to yourself talk, man. They were attacked by a swarm of aliens. They were not interested in doing a checkup and inventory on the ship. Let's see, we have cryopods, we have snacks, we have bottles of water, we have a face hugger. Wait, this isn't supposed to be here. It was a pretty dire moment for them to get off of LV-426. Why would they be checking around when there's a life and death situation at hand?
You're gonna die too?
What is it about psychotic patients that provokes filmmakers to always tell the protagonists they're going to die?
It's a very common trope in storytelling where a seemingly insane character actually has supreme insight on what's going on around him, and will be able to tell characters some things that they shouldn't reasonably know, but somehow do based on their insanity. Hell, in TF2 here, the soldier, who's probably second to the pyro in terms of not having all the lights on upstairs, is the one who was dropping hints about where the sniper was actually born in, whereas everyone else just assumed he was Australian.
They didn't hear it walk in at all? Is that asshole wearing ballet slippers or something?
The xenomorph is supposed to be a stealthy entity. If they were able to hear it, it would not be a stealthy entity. This is why complaining about the xenomorph using stealth tactics makes no sense. It was always supposed to be sneaky, dude. Like, you're aware that the xenomorph is effectively a wild animal, a hunter, if you would, or a predator if you want to get cheeky. Have you ever noticed how often predators will try to sneak up on their prey because it's a lot easier to get the kill when the prey isn't aware of them and actively trying to escape? It's the same thing.
This image is so closely associated with this movie, I'm going to award it an honorary roll credits.
There's nothing actually wrong with the scene, but it is the most iconic shot in the entire movie, so I desperately need to figure out a way to sin it somehow. You know, you could just try to point out actual objective flaws with these movies and maybe toss a joke or two in between, similar to what the pitch meetings videos from Screen Rant tends to do. Sure, the videos will probably be more like 3 to 5 minutes and thus miss that sweet 10-minute mark for that additional savory ad revenue. But, you know, you have multi-millions of subscribers. You should certainly still make quite the buck either way.
We find out later why the alien didn't kill Ripley, but why did it let Rapey McRaperson in the straitjacket live?
Because, as you've tried to avoid showing but left just a split second of it, the alien was too busy procuring the prey it already killed.
That's probably the best part of the movie. So you'd think I'd remove a sin, but I reiterate, this is probably the best part of the movie.
I really don't understand why they insist on sinning things that they actually like. Yes, it increases the video runtime, but The amount of time it takes for them to remove a sin with the extended sound effect and all is actually longer than the amount of time it takes to add a sin. In other words, they can make that mad dosh just giving movies a credit they deserve. What a thought.
Oh man, they made this poor asshole mop up leftover Andrews and put up all these chairs by himself? How is this important?
Well, someone has to clean up the mess, and that's probably his job. And it shows that they're very dedicated to maintaining their order and structure even in such dire situations.
It's like a lion sticks close to the zebras.
But I learned on the historically accurate Jungle Cruise at Disneyland that the lions are always just protecting the sleeping zebras. And now I'm wondering what other lies Skipper Chet told me.
And here's a movie literally comparing the xenomorph to an earthly predator and the characters themselves to prey, just as I mentioned earlier. But rather than use that scene to maybe revamp some of his previous sins and understand, alright, I generally understand how predators hunt, and therefore I shouldn't fault the xenomorph and subsequently the movie for trying to be stealthy, he just makes a bad joke.
There's definitely something in here with us. And it's nice enough to wait till you can set all your traps up before attacking. These aliens have gotten way more considerate by the third film.
The alien in the first film allowed Ripley to start up a self-destruct sequence and oblige her by just going into the escape shuttle rather than trying to stop her. The aliens have always been a little bit polite, is what I'm saying.
I've heard in a lot of writers' rooms they have a list on a wall that details all of the things they refuse to do on their television show or movie. There should have been one for this movie. And number one on that list should have been, do not f***ing have Ripley be impregnated with a f***ing alien.
Why not? One of your big complaints about the movie is that it's very boring. So having the main character impregnated by one of the aliens and effectively be on a timer now does raise some stakes and add some intrigue, does it not?
I have one inside of me. It's a queen, an egg layer.
How the did Ripley see that level of detail from that fuzzy-ass picture? That looked like the background of a Spike Jones music video from the 90s.
For the same reason that your grandparents were probably able to understand what went on the screen that was only a few inches tall and wide and completely in black and white. They're used to the technology and how it visualizes things, and are able to discern detail based on that practice, whereas someone like you might not be able to immediately recognize things because you're not used to such low-resolution imagery. It's like when doctors view things in an MRI scan or whatever. They're able to discern these details that would go completely over the head of you and I because we don't know exactly what we're supposed to be looking for.
Just want to point out that this movie had a budget of $50 million in 1992.
Indeed, a movie from 1992 might have some dated special effects. In fact, that's generally how special effects work. They tend to get better over time.
Kevin! Don't struggle! Is Dylan really asking Kevin not to struggle while he is trying not to be eaten by a f***ing alien?
Dylan is trying to grab Kevin's legs and pull him down from the alien's clutches, made difficult by the constant kicking. Not being a professional when it comes to removing people from the grasp of strange space monsters, he's not able to process the fact that telling somebody to calm down isn't going to work. If you saw somebody like choking and didn't know CPR, for example, you would probably make some dumb mistakes and say some stupid things too. It's just the limitations of being human, of being rushed and scared and desperately trying to do something.
So Dylan stays behind to hold the alien in the lead bay, but he knows Ripley's got a much more dangerous situation inside of her. What's the deal with the sacrifice if the alternative is even worse?
But that's a thing. She has a much more dangerous situation inside of her. It is not presently a threat, unlike the xenomorph that has already killed multiple prisoners and is running around the facility ready to kill more. That seems like something a lot more immediate and something that people would much rather focus on first before handling the baby.
So I guess the idea here is that water is mixing with the hot lead and making the exoskeleton brittle. Eventually, the increased internal pressure would cause the alien to explode. However, for this to work, the alien would have to be literally burning alive inside the outer shell. So the fact that it's still jumping around like a fucking spider monkey is bonkers as hell and pretty much bull.
Jeremy does not know what adrenaline is, or whatever the xenomorph equivalent might be. But even when someone is on death's door, they could still potentially perform feats of strength and athleticism based on adrenaline alone. It's a hell of a drug, dude, and the alien is probably utilizing some space version of it. But even if that was not the case, it's an alien. It has a different biology than us human being people persons, so maybe it's able to climb and jump even with its insides melting.
The company sent me here to show your friendly face, to demonstrate how important you are to us, to me.
Weyland-Yutani knows how the gestation works, right? I mean, it's been almost a century since the first chestburster. Why wouldn't they just wait around for Ripley to give birth, which should happen any minute, and just capture the little gal as soon as she comes out?
Come on, Jerbear. You've seen the first Alien. You know that if a chestburster comes out of somebody and they're surrounded by these giant strange monkey men, it will fucking skedaddle and hide in some crevice or go in some hole in the wall, never to be seen until it's fully grown and a much more formidable threat. Weyland-Yutani wants to have Ripley captured so they can make sure that the chest bursting is controlled and the xenomorph isn't able to escape from their grasp. Waiting for her to just give birth wherever is going to ruin that opportunity. In the second Alien vs. Predator game, they even went as far as to have special facilities set up for people to give birth to the alien, and these little tubes attached to their stomachs to hold the xenomorph inside when it does come out. And that's the final part of the video that I'll be going over. And now I shall address the common retort that CinemaSins is supposed to be a comedy, so why are you taking it seriously? And the big reason for that is there's literally zero distinction between what's supposed to be a joke and what's supposed to be a serious criticism. Because any time they make a criticism of a movie and turns out to be poorly executed because there is an explanation that solves that criticism, CinemaSins would run and hide behind the "it's just a joke, bro." They often misrepresent these movies, feign ignorance, twist and distort scenes, and outright just fucking lie for the sake of having a higher numerical value on their sin counter and a longer runtime for their video. And for people who actually give a shit about movies and the art form, and for people who are aware that a lot of CinemaSins audience doesn't watch the movies they sin and take their word for it that these movies are bad, it's rather upsetting, and we'd rather not see it. I've mentioned pitch meetings earlier, and while they are not perfect when it comes to their own critiques and takedowns of movies, they are a lot better at not deliberately misrepresenting a film for the sake of extending runtime. I would much rather CinemaSins return to how they used to be, where their videos were shorter, but their critiques were a lot more on point. As they say, no movie is without sin, and it could genuinely be interesting and enjoyable to see where some of the greats of cinema have faltered due to human error or the decisions of executives or anything like that. Unfortunately, they are just interested in making their videos as long as possible and feel that "it's just a joke, bro" is a perfectly acceptable reason to try to volley actual criticism and disdain for certain movies out, and then hide when people point out where they're wrong. This might be the only response to cinema sins I make, unless a new movie comes out that I really enjoy and they decide to relentlessly shit on it out of sheer ignorance, or worse yet, willful ignorance, in light of a profit opportunity. I have no interest in, say, becoming the next Birdman or anything, who has made a name for himself when it comes to responding to cinema sins, but I figure this might be a fun little side project to engage in, and just something to watch while we all wait for Scorn. So until that day comes, I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.